Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
February 28th, we will lift the indoor mask requirement.
as COVID cases and hospitalizations drop, the governor lifts the state's indoor mask mandate, but schools are still in question.
We can stop this involvement of young people in carjackings.
The mayor blames remote learning for the spike in carjackings. Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in on that and more.
Efforts to ban certain books are spreading across the country. A look at the history and impact of the book banning movement.
It might be the most polarizing tradition in Chicago, dibs. A look at the long-standing practice and some ways residents are claiming their shoveled-out parking spots.
It's so much bigger than food.
2 grocery stores are preparing to open on the west side. How the owners plan to increase food access while building community.
We introduce you to a local artist who combs the shores of Lake Michigan in search of artistic inspiration.
And Mexico's history and culture are reflected in dance performances happening this weekend. But first, some of today's top stories. Governor J.B. Pritzker announces Illinois' mask mandate for most indoor public spaces will soon be lifted.
We are now seeing the fastest rate of decline in our COVID-19 hospitalization metrics since the pandemic began. If these trends continue, and we expect them to, then on Monday, February 28th, we will lift the indoor mask requirement for the state of Illinois.
Pritzker says the mask mandate for schools, which is currently being challenged in court, will remain in place for the time being. The statewide mask mandate has been in place since August 30th, following a surge in COVID cases due to the Delta variant. And we'll have much more on this later in the program. A 26-year-old woman has been arrested for vandalizing a memorial to a slain Chicago police officer. Illinois State Police say they have arrested Anna Kachakian for allegedly vandalizing the Ella French Memorial at the Thompson Center. The memorial featured a photo of Officer French, which had been torn down and thrown in the trash. French was killed in a shooting following a traffic stop in Englewood in August. 2 brothers, Eric and Imante Morgan, have been charged in relation to the shooting and are expected back in court in March. Black business owners in Chicago are calling out the NFL for failing to do business with them. Pastor Anthony Williams, joined by state lawmaker LaShawn Ford, decried the NFL's record as it relates to hiring black businesses and is calling on the organization to do better.
The NFL does not do business with black businesses. The NFL only does 0.5% of business in America with black businesses. 32 teams and black vendors can't sell popcorn in the NFL.
Meanwhile, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is addressing explosive allegations of racism in the league's hiring practices. Former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores is suing the league and 3 teams for what he says are discriminatory hiring practices that have limited head coaching opportunities for African Americans. At a news conference ahead of Sunday's Super Bowl, Goodell says the NFL's record on hiring black head coaches has fallen short.
I think we made a tremendous amount, a lot of progress in a lot of areas, but not at the head coach. And that is something that we really have focused on to try to get the kind of results that we would expect. And we fell short of that by a long shot for us. Racism or any form of discrimination is against our values and really something that we will not tolerate.
And up next, more on the state's soon-to-be-lifted mask mandate. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
As you just heard, the state mask mandate is on its way out, but not quite yet, and not for everyone. As we mentioned earlier, Governor J.B. Pritzker today announced the indoor mask mandate for the state of Illinois will lift on February 28th if current COVID trends keep up. But he says schools will have to wait a little bit longer, even as a recent court ruling overturning the mandate has caused confusion at districts statewide. Is this the right time to unmask? Joining us are Dr. Jessica Herrick, an associate professor of medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Illinois Chicago, and Dr. Robert Murphy, professor of infectious diseases at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. He is also the executive director of the Institute for Global Health. Welcome both of you here to Chicago tonight. First, Dr. Herrick, your reaction to this announcement today.
I think a lot of us have sort of cautious optimism. We think that numbers have been falling and things are looking better. And so if things keep going the way they've been going, I'm cautiously optimistic. What I want people to keep in mind, though, is that if the numbers start going back up, then we may have to sort of reconsider this decision.
And Dr. Murphy, Governor Pritzker is predicating the decision on projections of what hospitalizations will be on February 28th. So is February 28th the right date in your mind?
Well, you know, February 28th is a guess. If you look at it today, there's 20 times more new infections than there were in July 2021. So we're coming down. The very steep decline in the number of cases, but we were up so high that where we are today is still really bad. There's 111,000 people hospitalized in the United States right now and 2,500 people dying per day. This is like not in control yet. I don't know about February 28th. We'll find out when we get there. It's about 3 weeks away.
Yep, 3 weeks away. And Dr. Herrick, it still would be up to cities and municipalities to do what they will with their own mask ordinances. Chicago officials have hinted that they'd be ready to lift the city's mask mandate around then, too. Should Chicago follow suit?
I think it really is impossible to answer that question right now. We'll have to kind of see where things go. Again, if the numbers keep going down, then maybe it will be time for Chicago to lift the mask mandate as well. The best thing that people can do to try and make that happen is to make sure everybody gets their vaccines.
And Dr. Murphy, you mentioned that so much is unknown over the next few weeks. Let's take a look at hospitalizations. They were at 2,266 when Illinois reimposed the mandate back in August. Now they're at 2,496. So they're not below that pre-mask level yet. How much do you expect this to dip by February 28th?
Well, the problem with looking at just the hospitalization rate is it lags 2 weeks behind the infection rate. Because once you get infected, it takes about a week to get sick, and then about a week to get really sick and end up in the hospital for those that end up in the hospital. So, looking at the hospitalization rate is a little bit late. But I agree, though, the only thing that's going to control this is be vaccinated and be boosted.
And again, the governor is citing projections from his epidemiologist showing that those hospital rates are declining precipitously and will continue to do so, fingers crossed in his mind. However, the lifting of the mask mandate will not apply to schools right now. Take a look.
The equation for schools just looks different right now than it does for the general population. Schools need a little more time. For community infection rates to drop, for our youngest learners to become vaccine eligible, and for more parents to get their kids vaccinated.
Dr. Herrick, the right call to keep the mask mandate in place for schools, and how much more time do you believe schools need?
I think so for now. I think the thing to keep in mind is that as we lift the mask mandate in places around the state, people can make personal choices about whether they want to go out to dinner or go to a movie. Schools are very different. That's not really a personal choice. Everybody gets educated in our public system for the most part. And the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of schools may have preschools, and so they may have children who aren't even of the age yet that they can get vaccinated. So I think schools are just a completely different type of environment. And for now, I do agree that I think it's reasonable to keep the mask mandate going there.
And Dr. Murphy, I assume you agree with that as well, despite the current confusion because of last week's court ruling.
Yeah, we have a central state judge making health decisions, which is nothing short of ridiculous. But the thing with the schools, another reason why we've got to keep the mask in there, is that the kids, even though they're eligible for vaccination, have the lowest vaccination rates, especially the 5 to 11. It's a very poor uptake in the vaccines there. Even in the kids 12 and older, the uptake is very low. And so put that into place with everything, and it just makes the matter even worse.
Districts still have to boost those vaccination rates. So Dr. Herrick, you mentioned concern or cautious optimism of where the state is at and where the state is going. Any concern on your part about other variants or the quote-unquote stealth Omicron?
I think obviously those are concerns for us. I think the thing to do is that, and this is where many of us in our field are very frustrated, that the way to prevent those, the way to prevent the next wave, the next, Omicron, is to have everybody get vaccinated. And, our vaccination rates are great. Dr. Pritzker mentioned in his press conference that we have kind of the best in the Midwest, but we still have a lot of room to go.
Dr. Murphy, does that mean that things like the indoor vaccination mandate should stay in place in Chicago even when the mask mandate lifts?
Absolutely, at this point. Otherwise, we're just looking for the next variant to come. The stealth variant you mentioned, it's 50% easier to transmit than Omicron, which was 300 to 600% easier to transmit than Delta. So this is it is so infectious right now.
And Dr. Herrick, there's a lot of sentiment out there from kids, from parents, from general residents that they feel like they're over COVID, they're sick of it, they're fatigued by it. What is your message to them?
You just you can't give up in the last half mile of the marathon you're running. That would be my message to them. We're not there yet. And if we keep doing all the right things, we will get there. But the virus doesn't care how we feel. It doesn't care if we feel that we're, quote, over it. It is still raging out there.
Dr. Murphy, is there any data showing a concern about other variants popping up in any other parts of the world?
Well, look at, Omicron was identified in Africa November 11th, 2021. It's not been around very long, and it's taken over the world. The BA2 variant, the stealth Omicron, is only a couple weeks old, and it's already up to about 20% in some places. It's going to take over also. The virus doesn't care. The virus is not done with us.
Exactly.
Dr. Murphy, does that mean that folks that might have had COVID are not immune to the stealth Omicron variant?
Well, the people that have not had COVID or the vaccine are very much at risk. If you get Omicron, whether the BA1 or BA2, the stealth or the regular one, you're probably protected for at least 3 months. But after that, it's fair game. But if you've had the vaccine and you also got Omicron, you're what we call a hybrid patient, and you probably have very good immunity.
All right, a lot of uncertainty here, but a lot of optimism from the governor today, and cautious optimism from both of you. And our thanks to Dr. Jessica Herrick and Dr. Robert Murphy. And we'll have much more on the lifted mask mandate coming up in Spotlight Politics. But first, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. After decades of disinvestment, 2 new grocery stores are being built on Chicago's west side, something residents have long awaited as other grocery store chains have closed up shop. We spoke with 2 local owners about their investment in the community and what lies ahead on the road to development.
This is going to be a full gut rehab.
4 years ago, Liz Abuno started hosting pop-up markets in Austin, a west side community area with few fresh food options. The store, named 40 Acres Fresh Market, also delivers fresh produce across the Chicago area. But the dream was to open a brick-and-mortar store.
When this space came on the market, I went to Westside Health Authorities and said, it needs some work, but it has a parking lot, it's a corner property, it's pretty close to Oak Park, so that'll be in the catchment area, so we get a diverse customer base. I think this could be the site for 40 Acres Fresh Market. Do you want to co-develop it with me?
Tracy Smith has been with 40 Acres since the beginning.
It's very exciting. I've never been a part of nothing like this. I just think they do everything, like go from finding the first van to finding the location where they wanted the store. Every time we go over to the store to get something, they oh my God, when you guys gonna open? Man, soon, it's coming soon.
With a similar vision in mind, Albert Person is working to make fresh food more accessible in neighboring North Lawndale.
I've seen the early effects of the disadvantage of the West Side versus other communities. Growing up, I've always had an aspiration to wanting to do more, so it was always a struggle.
Person says his store will be the first Black-owned and operated market offering a full line of fresh groceries and meat in the North Lawndale area.
Here I am now being able to fulfill my dream to help my people. I call it the Healing the Hood. Through the Healthy Eating Initiative, there's not a lot of grocery stores that we can get fresh products.
Person plans to source the majority of food and produce from Black farmers and Black-owned businesses, including farmers in Kankakee.
So we shouldn't have to go outside of our communities to shop. With all these closing, that pretty much left us nowhere to shop in the community.
Abuno and Person say residents are excited for what's to come, and the store owners are supportive of each other's endeavors.
I am so excited for Lawndale. They need another grocery store. Al cares about this community. He's very intentional in what he's trying to create.
Third-generation Lawndale resident Princess Shaw says she knows firsthand the need for greater food access in the area.
There's like at least 6-7 blocks to the east of us, 6-7 blocks to the west of us, north and south. There's no real grocery stores. I know one thing's for certain, people will travel for food because we have to survive, right?
Shaw does community outreach for the market to help make sure residents know they can access food and produce.
That's what I bring to the table, is like knowing that I know Ms. Johnson stays over there, right? What we want to try to do as well is like have a system in place for seniors. Doing that weekly check-in with being a community, like, hey, Ms. Johnson, do you got enough bread? Do you have enough mayonnaise?
Community relationships and trust are key in both Person and Abuno's plans. Something community leaders on the West Side say is essential to opening a business that will be able to sustain itself long term.
So I think that is critical if you do see that type of homegrown operation, that community supports it, because ultimately that's what's going to sustain it over time.
Abuno hopes to rebuild trust with residents who've experienced decades of disinvestment, and she sees the grocery store as much more than just somewhere to access food.
It's a place for people to just to meet and be together and interact as human beings. And I think that's so important for a community. And when a community doesn't have that social infrastructure and people don't have a place to go, you see that it's harder to keep that cohesion within a neighborhood.
And North Lawndale Meat and Fresh Produce Market is set to open this spring, and 40 Acres is hoping to start construction this year. For more information on these Westside grocery stores, visit WTTW.com/news. Up next, the controversy over teaching the graphic novel Mouse and other books in the classroom. But first, a look at the weather. Efforts to ban certain books from school libraries are gaining steam nationwide. Last month, a Tennessee school board voted to ban the Holocaust-inspired graphic novel Mouse, citing violent imagery and controversial themes on Nazi resistance. Some groups are criticizing the ban, saying the book plays an important role in teaching kids about the Holocaust. As our next guest tells us, the concept of censoring or banning books has its own history lesson. Ada Palmer, an associate professor of history at the University of Chicago and a science fiction author, joins us to discuss. Professor, thank you for joining us. So as we just mentioned, recently the Holocaust graphic novel Mouse pulled from library shelves in a Tennessee school district. The school board reportedly cited the use of 8 curse words and nude imagery in the depiction of a suicide, or a nude imagery of a woman specifically. What's your reaction to the school district's move?
Obscenity is usually what people point to when they want to justify banning a book in America or similar nations like New Zealand or Australia, because obscenity is the thing that we're most comfortable with censoring. But often that isn't really the reason. And we see this when we collect statistics about book objections. So, for example, lots of summer reading lists have romance books on them about teens getting together. And the ones where the teens have a mixed race couple or a non-white couple get objected to much more often than ones with a white couple, even if there isn't any more sexual content in them. Obscenity is the excuse, but often racism or homophobia or anti-Semitism is the actual reason, and people hide it underneath by saying this thing that makes me uncomfortable, I'm going to label it obscenity, even though the discomfort is about something else.
Now, last year, members of a local school board in Downers Grove also voted to remove a book called Gender Queer. It centers on gender identity, of course. Should students have access to books about sexual identity or race in a school library?
Absolutely, because school libraries are there to help kids learn about things so that they don't run into them in the wild and not understand them and not know how to take care of themselves, right? Sex ed helps kids understand their bodies and make prudent choices. It prevents the spread of STDs, and it helps with sexual empowerment and reduces teen pregnancy. Educating kids about drugs reduces drug use. Educating kids about gender helps people understand what they're seeing on the internet, what their friends are going through, what they're seeing people talk about, because they're going to run into these themes on Twitter, on Facebook, in images, and they need the opportunity to look up and learn about it so that they know what it is instead of facing it with ignorance and without guidance.
Of course, you know, in a lot of these debates, we hear from parents who are outspoken about the books they oppose for their children. Who should decide? Who gets to decide which books stay in schools?
Because teachers are experts about the grade level that they teach, right? They look up and know what new books are being released for that age group. They read about the educational needs of that exact year. They talk to their students regularly and find out, you know, what words are they running across online. They really are experts about every specific grade level that they teach. And so they know, you know, these kids are just at the age they're starting to learn the word genocide, and they're scared and they want to know what it is. This is the moment to teach that. So it really needs to be teachers, because experts should be making these decisions who know what those kids need at that moment. And a parent isn't an expert on a particular year the way a teacher is.
Of course, students have argued that they don't always agree with groups who are banning books, say that those books are there for educational purposes. What role does the student voice have in this argument?
I think a very important one, especially because the bans really do affect students very heavily. Whenever there's one of these bans, we see a book like Mouse jump up in the bestseller list, and Mouse sold hugely after the ban was announced. But it isn't kids who are getting the chance to buy those. Those sales are people who are anti-censorship, often in cities in multiple states away, who are buying the book to support the author. But meanwhile, the kids are affected by the ban and affected by that school board decision. They don't have that same access. And it's also going to make their teachers reluctant to assign similar books in future. So the kids need to be listened to, because what they want to have access to and the questions they're asking need to shape the curriculum.
When you look back at the history of censorship, what are some of the similarities between previous movements and the current one?
One of the big ones is that in the modern era, the big way to justify censorship is to say it's about protecting kids. It's the one form of censorship that we find most acceptable. And so lots of different types of censorship have justified themselves under that umbrella while really lashing out much farther. And another important one is that censorship organizations, whether we're talking about the Inquisition or the USSR or modern ones, even ancient ones, one of the patterns is that it's not about trying to destroy books that already exist. It's trying to intimidate people so that they don't produce more books. So if Mouse suddenly spikes, but dozens of schools and school districts across the country become nervous about assigning similar books, for example, Own Voices, memoirs about oppression, then the next dozen really powerful books like Mouse that get published won't sell well because schools will be afraid of them. And then the next dozen after that may not get published at all. The biggest victims of this kind of challenge are the books that will never be produced or never be read because it creates a culture of fear and silence. That's always the goal, or one of the big goals, of censorship.
Okay. Professor Ada Palmer, that's where we'll have to leave it. A lot to think about. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And now to Paris with an urgent public service announcement. Paris.
That's right, Brandis. For those of you who've put out chairs, stools, plant stands, vacuum cleaners to claim a shoveled out parking spot, Chicago Streets and Sanitation Department has a message for you. You've got until Friday to move them or lose them. Our WTTW news reporter and unofficial dibs correspondent, Patty Wetley, joins us now with more. Patty Wetley, all right, fill us in on dibs, the background, and whether or not it's actually allowed in the city.
Right. Well, you know, for those who are maybe spending their very first winter in Chicago, it's an unofficial tradition that if you spend, you know, as people claim, 4 to 5 hours digging their car out, they get to claim that spot, claim dibs by, you know, putting whatever in its place to hold it for when they come back. And is it legal? It's not illegal. So there's nothing that says you can't do it, but there's also nothing on the books that codifies or puts any parameters around what dibs is. So people make up their own interpretation, and that's why it's such like a Wild West divisive thing, you know?
And it's such a Wild West thing because of the different things that are used to claim a spot. So what are the most creative ones that you've seen?
I mean, obviously you have classic dibs, which are your like 2 lawn chairs. Right. You know, you mentioned a vacuum cleaner. People put out kids' toys. I once saw an electric piano out. I'm assuming it was broken. Some people get so creative setting like entire tables, putting out an entire set of like a table and 4 chairs and changing the flower arrangement every day. You know, it's kind of all
like
over
they're expecting dinner in the parking spot.
Yeah, I mean, why not? You know, you've got the chairs there. Just invite people for tea.
That should certainly be a dibs going forward.
Old styles, a couple old styles out there. I don't know.
People sitting for old styles and teas, so no one will take the parking spot that you so diligently shoveled out. All right, Patty, thank you for filling us in.
Oh, but stuff's got to be gone by Friday.
That's right. That's the whole point of us talking about this. It's got to be gone by Friday, or else you're going to lose that broken electric keyboard.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you so much. And you can read Patty's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, our Spotlight Politics team on the politics of Governor Pritzker's mask mandate rollback announcement. We introduce you to a local artist who combs the shores of Lake Michigan in search of artistic inspiration. And the Ballet Folklorico de Mexico is bringing its greatest hits back to Chicago this weekend. We have a sneak peek. But first, some more of today's top stories. No bail for a Chicago man who is charged with the fatal shooting of a 12-year-old boy last month. 21-year-old Jaron Hughes was denied bail today after being charged with the first-degree murder of Marcel Wilson in Englewood. Prosecutors say Hughes had gone to stay with Wilson's older brother, and Hughes allegedly shot Wilson after the boy had teased him. Hughes is due back in court February 22nd. A massive modernization of Chicago's street lights to more energy-efficient LED lights is nearly complete. Mayor Lori Lightfoot announced the project's progress at the Lions View manufacturing plant today on the west side, where more than half the lights were assembled by city residents.
This 4-year project converted 280,000 hazy, outdated, often broken, high-pressure sodium streetlights to energy-efficient LED lights. And that's a big deal.
Officials say the Chicago Smart Lighting Program is projected to save the city $100 million over the next 10 years. Mayor Lori Lightfoot praised the project for not only improving public safety and saving money, but also creating jobs for vulnerable residents while reducing the city's carbon footprint. Developers of the old Morton Salt Warehouse announced the first lineup of summer shows as the building transforms into the city's newest music venue. The developers of the warehouse, which was officially designated a landmark by the city last year, say they plan to spend $30 million redeveloping the space into offices and a music hall. Dubbed the Salt Shed, the new building is expected to host its first concerts in early August. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Sounds like a cool place to see a concert. Thank you, Paris. And of course, stay right there because now it is time to dive in a little deeper to the politics behind unmasking and much more in tonight's Spotlight Politics. Joining us now are Heather Sharon and, of course, Paris. Thank you for not going anywhere. So let's start with the politics of Governor J.B. Pritzker lifting the indoor mask mandate starting February 28th. Here's what he said today about the change.
We're following the numbers that the CDC is putting out and recognizing that we're not there yet, and that's why February 28th is a goal. It's not today. We're announcing it today, so people will know, businesses will know, when that date is coming. Our trajectory looks like we're going to be somewhere close to maybe where we were last summer.
So, Paris, is Governor Pritzker's, change in the mask mandate, is this based on science or what some critics are calling political science?
Well, certainly politics. That question was brought up today with the governor, but the governor says it is truly based on the science, and he's saying by February 28th that the hospitalization rate will be well below what he believes, or he believes it'll be well below the rate that it was when that mask mandate was instituted back on August 30th. But you can't deny that he and other blue state governors have announced in the last couple days the rescinding of this mask mandate, although the governor did say this announcement does not extend to schools or school children, and the reason for that is children are not vaccinated at very high rates right now. They're together in this space for several hours a day, and if you look at the state's own contact tracing data, schools are by far the #1 place in the state where COVID is contracted. So he said hopefully schools can lose their mask mandates a few weeks after that, although it's really confusing right now because of that court ruling last week. So it remains to be seen whether kids will still be wearing masks in schools over the next couple months.
Right, of course, because we know the governor has asked the attorney general to go ahead and start appealing that in the court and also asking for a stay of that TRO. So we know that GOP leader Jim Durkin wrote the governor a pointed letter about masking that said in part, quote, "Today I am dealing with irate parents scrambling for childcare to make it work, students being separated in school buildings, and no answers from your administration. Your lack of a plan has forced people to give up hope that they can ever have a normal life in Illinois." Not mincing words. Heather, did that play a role in Pritzker's change?
I don't think so. Pritzker was asked if he was, reacting sort of the criticism that he's gotten, but he said that he really wasn't, that he was following the science, and that so many critics of the mask mandate have also turned into people who have actively encouraged people not to get vaccinated. He said he just doesn't take it very seriously. I think it will be interesting to watch what happens in the city of Chicago. Of course, we all remembered from back in 2020 that cities and counties can put in stricter restrictions than the state. They can't put in looser restrictions. And Mayor Lori Lightfoot's office said in a statement today that she's hopeful that the city will also meet those metrics that the Governor Pritzker is excited about. But instead, she wants to make sure that the city is mostly at a lower rate of transmission. And right now, the city remains at a high rate of transmission. It's unclear whether the city will be able to complete 2 weeks at that lower level by February 28th. That would have to happen no later than Monday.
And going back, Brandis, to that letter from Durkin, remember, that was in response to a letter that House Speaker Chris Welch sent to Durkin saying, hey, some of your members are saying some wild things about a proposal here from one of our members on the Democratic side, State Representative Deb Conroy, who had proposed something that was taken wildly out of context. Someone had said she's proposing some kind of COVID detention camps, which is of course not true, but she had received some very harsh death threats, some very dangerous death threats, and in fact, a couple of members of the Democratic caucus had been receiving death threats in the last few days. So Welch wrote that letter to Durkin saying, watch the language among some of your members because it's really turning into some dangerous situations for some of our members.
And a lot of letter writing going on because I believe the governor responded to Durkin as well with his own letter calling out some members of the GOP for some of the information that they've been spreading. And in that letter, letting him know that he was going to make this announcement about February 28th. Paris, Durkin isn't the only Republican, though, who wants the mask mandate lifted. Long list of GOP candidates who want it gone as well.
Well, of course. I mean, every GOP candidate in the primary field running for governor have wanted it gone. They've called for the governor to rescind the mandate. They've been against mandates. And today, they're saying that finally the governor is listening to them, although I'm sure to their liking it's not going to happen soon enough. But getting back to that politics question, Brandis, the science and the politics are kind of colliding for Governor Pritzker here as the Omicron variant wanes. I'm sure Governor Pritzker does not want to have to deal with the question of mask mandates, vaccine mandates, shutdowns as the election really ramps up, which is going to be closer to the spring. The primary, of course, is in June, and then the general is going to be for the 5 months after that. So if Omicron really is waning and there is no other variant coming in, I'm sure Pritzker is breathing a huge sigh of relief that he's not going to have to deal with this as a campaign issue from candidates like Darren Bailey, the downstate senator, who's made this his whole cause of running, challenging Pritzker in court on these mandates. So it's maybe one less thing that he'll have to worry about. But as the epidemiologist said earlier, we just don't know what's going to happen.
And Heather, before we move on, the vaccine mandate deadline for city workers was January 31st. What's happening with firefighters and police who are not complying?
Well, it's really two separate issues. We believe that the city has begun notifying members of every union who are not fully vaccinated at this point, who are not members of the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 7. Their challenge to the mayor's vaccine mandate remains in arbitration. We haven't gotten a decision in that ruling, but every other unionized city employee had until January 31st to be fully vaccinated and are now at risk of termination. So that will be a very important question as we go forward in the next week or so to see exactly how many city employees will lose their job because they're not fully vaccinated.
So a busy week in Chicago courtrooms for politicians and their attorneys, as Heather pointed out on Twitter. Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson on trial for in federal court. His lawyers are arguing that, he's just sort of sloppy and forgetful, bit of a hot mess. Prosecutors say, hot mess or not, lying on your taxes is still a crime. Paris, is that a strong defense?
It's not really a defense that I've ever really heard, and it's not as if the prosecutors, just like you said, or the defense, they're not even saying that mortgage interest deduction that he took for a loan that wasn't actually a mortgage. They're not even saying he didn't do that. They're just saying he can't keep his papers straight. He walks to the mailbox on, tax filing day. His desk is all strewn and tattered with papers. I don't know if that's a defense that a jury's going to buy, but it is very notable that Alderman Thompson has taken this all the way to trial. As we know, the family that he comes from, the Daley family, the son of a long-term mayor, the nephew of a long-term mayor, and the grandson of another long-term mayor. So it's certainly an unorthodox defense. They're not claiming some kind of, no, he properly claimed his tax deduction. They're just saying that he's a mess. But he's also, he's a working lawyer. He's a working alderman. I think the constituents of the 11th Ward don't want to hear that their alderman can't keep papers and numbers straight.
And they expect that he should be held to a higher standard when it comes to this stuff. Heather, the first Daley to face federal charges, can he survive this trial politically, even if he is acquitted?
Well, that is a really good question, and I would tell you that Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson was in the fight of his political life even before he was charged criminally. There's a strong movement to create Chicago's first ward where a majority of the voters would be Asian American. And to do that, the two maps that we've talked so much about that are sort of dueling, pretty much the one thing they agree on is the creation of that Asian American ward centered around Chinatown. To do that, though, it will carve up the 11th Ward, which of course is the heart of the old Daley empire. And it will make it very difficult that if Alderman Daley Thompson is acquitted and he runs for re-election, it's going to be very difficult for him to win re-election in a ward like that. And he has vociferously opposed this plan, calling it racist to make decisions based on race, whereas Asian American groups have said that they see this as a matter of fairness because Chicago's Asian American population has grown by nearly 30% in the last decade. So he's in a lot of trouble on many different fronts.
So another sitting alderman's case also went before a judge this week. Alderman Ed Burke's lawyers say secret government recordings should not be allowed. Paris, briefly remind us about this case.
14 counts, bribery, racketeering, conspiracy, allegedly all surrounding Burke trying to get business for his property tax appeal law firm, Clafter & Burke, from places like the redevelopers of the old Main Post Office, a Burger King in his ward. There's another allegation in Portage Park, and then the Field Museum. And there's been voluminous pretrial motions. This feels like Burke was first, charged years ago. And Burke's attorneys are arguing that, the main piece of evidence here, these wiretap recordings from former Alderman Danny Solis, well, we don't think those should be admitted because Solis was in all kinds of legal hot water of his own. He struck this deal with the government. He'd do whatever the government said. And essentially, he kind of went in and trapped Burke in their minds. So this key smoking gun piece of evidence that they have, the Burke lawyers are trying to say, you got to get rid of that. I don't know that a judge is going to rule in favor of that, and I really don't know when this trial is actually going to get going in earnest, because even the judge is saying, he's never seen such a stack of pretrial motions and hearings that he has to go through.
So I want to move on to the city's violence. During an announcement about staffing the city's carjacking task force 24 hours a day, Mayor Lori Lightfoot attributed the rise in carjackings to remote learning. Take a look.
A lot of parents went to work during the day thinking their teenagers were logged on for remote learning, only to find something else. And I asked, is there some new market for stolen cars? And unfortunately, the answer was no, that for many of these kids, some of whom had no prior involvement in the criminal justice system, this was pure boredom.
Chicago Teachers Union was not a fan of those comments, demanding the mayor immediately apologize. Heather, did Mayor Lightfoot step on her own good news here?
Well, it certainly shifted the conversation, and unfortunately, I don't think it was accurate. The city's own crime data shows that the surge in carjackings began months before the pandemic hit and months before remote learning was even a glimmer in any of our eyes. So I don't think that there is a causation there, and I don't think there's really enough evidence to say, as the mayor did, that there's a correlation there. But of course, this sort of goes to the heart of her argument with the Chicago Teachers Union, and it's what led to the work stoppage in January, where teachers wanted to teach remotely when Omicron was surging with COVID-19 and the mayor refused. But it really sort of took that focus off what the mayor was trying to say. Look, we're making progress on stopping carjacking. We're staffing up. We're taking it very seriously. And as we've talked about the pressure that Governor Pritzker is under and other elected officials, the mayor also faces that pressure too, because she's not up for re-election in 2022, but she's up for re-election if she runs again in February 2023, and that's not too long away.
Can I jump in there, Heather? And I agree with you. The data is not there to really make this causation or correlation between remote learning and carjacking. And that's not the first time I've heard this. I mean, I've heard from juvenile judges, I've heard from prosecutors who have said the same thing, that some kids that get caught up in carjacking or other types of felonies or misdemeanors, the judge will ask the kid, are you in school right now? Are you doing remote learning? The kid will say no. And it's true that CPS did lose track of thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of kids last year. So you're right, that we can't make that conclusion because we don't have data that makes that. But Mayor Lightfoot is echoing things that have been said out there.
So also, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul also up for re-election, proposing a law that will help prosecute retail theft rings. Heather, the law was proposed just as Chicago police arrested one alleged ringleader who reportedly dumped stolen cash registers on Pritzker's block. Something else to unpack another time. How much political peril are both the governor and the attorney general in the upcoming election? In about 40 seconds.
Well, there's no doubt that the Republican slate of statewide candidates are going to try to tag Governor Pritzker and Attorney General Raoul as soft on crime. And this is sort of a counteroffensive, trying to get in front of that, to blunt that criticism, which can be very damaging because everybody's concerned about crime.
Okay, campaign issue that we'll be talking about a lot more going forward, I'm sure. Heather Sharon, Paris Schutz, that's Spotlight Politics. Thank you. Up next, meet a local artist digging treasure out of the sand. We'll explain right after this.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
The Discovery is central to the work of an artist who seeks and finds all kinds of things on the shores of Lake Michigan. John Sauce makes artwork out of seemingly nothing, sifting the sand for debris left by people and nature. Producer Mark Vitale recently shared a portrait of the artist as a beachcomber. Here's another look.
He creates compelling compositions that document a place, or suggest an idea, or make a visual pun. For John Sauce, it always starts with a day at the beach.
Two parts of my mind are working when I'm walking along the beach. One of which is that I am searching for stuff, and my eyes are kind of tuned into what's on the ground, different shapes and colors. But I also do find it a meditative thing. I like to sort of work things out in my head, think about current events, what happened yesterday, what might happen today. Maybe just work out some of the messy stuff that happens in life.
Sauce carefully arranges the things he finds. He photographs the assemblage with his iPhone, and he prints the pictures on recycled aluminum. He hunts for these unexpected treasures year-round.
There are times when I really feel like I'm in the elements. There's heavy winds and big waves, and sometimes the sand blows across the surface of the ground and, gets right at you. So I kind of like the experience of being in all the seasons and feeling what that feels like to be out there, You can't feel that in your neighborhood or in your house.
The project started nearly 10 years ago when he shared his photos with family. He got noticed on social media and now has his second show at the Dime, artist Tony Fitzpatrick's gallery.
It took me a few years to convince John Sauce he was actually an artist. It's this ongoing artistic dialogue between him and that lake. And it tells us a lot about we the people. It tells us a lot about what we keep, what we revere, what we discard.
Every walk along the lakefront yields material for the next artful display of stuff that might include fireworks, or children's toys, or something more ominous.
When I get home and looking at things on my work table, as I put them together, it's as if I am putting a puzzle back together. I also like the fact that a lot of those things, if you're talking about driftwood or peach pits or walnuts or bird feathers, they all were once something that was alive. And now they've just been left on the beach. And so I like the idea of kind of giving them life again.
Sauce is relatively new to making art, but he frequently works with artists, recording artists. For decades, he has worked for Jam Productions, the Chicago-based concert promoter.
I don't want people to think that I'm like some lonely old man who walks around and picks litter up off the beach or anything, because I feel like I'm really engaged when I'm out in the morning. I'm looking for things, and I'm thinking about things, and I've got maybe some music, and there's a meditative quality to it. I get a lot out of it. It's a pretty great ritual.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The exhibition is called On the Beach. It's at the art gallery, The Dime in Humboldt Park through February 19th. And you can see more of the work of John Sauce on our website. And up next, Mexico's history and culture reflected in an upcoming performance. That's in a conversation that first aired on Saturday's Chicago Tonight Latino Voices with guest host and CBS 2 Chicago reporter Marissa Parra. So please stay with us.
Ballet Folklorico de Mexico de Amalia Hernandez is celebrating its 70th anniversary this year, and the party is coming right here to Chicago. The Mexico City-based ensemble is bringing together audience-favorite performances, traversing the history and the culture of Mexico for performances at the Auditorium Theater this weekend. Joining us now with more is Ballet Folklorico Artistic Director Viviana Basanta. Viviana is the daughter of Amalia Hernandez, who founded the dance ensemble. Viviana, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to talk more about this. We do know this performance takes the audience throughout Mexico's history, from the Aztec era to modern day and across its different regions. So can you give us a taste of what we can expect to see?
Yes, well, thank you for the invitation. We love to go to the art city
Chicago, we really like it because we always think that Chicago has art everywhere you look. So I think it's a special time with our anniversaries of the 70th anniversary. So we're really happy and proud to be with you in Chicago.
Well, we're getting a little taste on the screen there of the bright colors and images. You've included 2 dances that have been declared intangible heritage of humanity by UNESCO, La Charreada and Danza L'Elbenada. How did you translate these historical dances into ballet for the stage?
Well, yes, we have a few dances. I choose the program with the choreographies that my mother made in different times of the company. So one of the first choreographies is Ballet de Michoacán, Sones Antiguos de Michoacán. It's called Sones, Old Songs from Michoacán. And the other one is Al Ballet Azteca, is an honor to Moctezuma. And then after a few years, she made the Charreada, also Sones de Tarima de Tixla, also Veracruz. Every composition is from different stages of her choreography heritage.
That's just incredible. Well, for those who don't know, the music is performed live by the Ballet's ensemble and brings in the different musical traditions from across Mexico. So, Viviana, how do these traditional sounds incorporate into the performances?
Well, all the music is traditional. Some of them, they make some arranges to make it more dynamic or more accents and more so that the performance go with a different kind of dynamics. It goes up, it comes down. So it was solos, then a big group, and then again solos. So the music is music of each region. My mother always liked to go to each region to learn. She didn't learn steps in a room. She always made a whole investigation of each part of the choreographies that she made. Also the pre-Hispanic that we don't have now alive, the steps that she made with anthropologists, ethnography, and historic persons that help her to make the whole composition. So she make the movements from the codices, Mexican codices, and from one image to another, she make the movement.
Well, we talked about how bright and colorful these costumes are. When it comes to traditional dress, is it easy to bring those recognizably Mexican costumes to dance performances?
Well, we have to do some things to make the, I don't know how you say, tela, the fabrics. It has to be more thick, or so you can have performance every day and it doesn't broke, because some of the pieces are really fine, and so we have to look for some fabrics that you can use it more and every day and in a tour, because there are no fabrics that you wash it today and tomorrow it's done. So it's a lot of things that you have to manage.
Well, we have about 30 seconds left. I want to give you a chance to answer one last question. Your company travels across the U.S., across the world. Our audiences are surprised by the wide variety in Mexican culture reflected in your performances.
Yes, I think we always have a good public, because the company and the dancers are really involved in the contact with the public and trying to make them feel the emotions and the different dynamics, and also the heritage of the culture. Absolutely. All the profound history, that everything comes from the root to our days. So I think we have a lot of different language to share with
Absolutely.
With the public.
Well, once again, Ballet Folklorico de Mexico will be at the Auditorium Theater on February 12th and 13th. You'll find more on that on our website. You can see that little piece of history for yourself. And our special thanks to Viviana Basanta.
I thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, and we're really proud to be in Chicago.
Back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. We pay a visit to Niles for the next stop in our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series.
And everyday life and afterlife are explored in a new gallery dedicated to ancient Egyptian artworks. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.